And welcome to the Crash Chords podcast. Yet another week, yet another review, yet another podcast.
Don't sound so happy.
Actually, it was kind of a neutral thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was very neutral. Right off the bat, let's introduce our special guest this week, Nelson Lugo.
Hey, what up, internets?
He peaked already.
He's back, second time on the show, and he brought us an album this time.
Yeah, instead of subjugating him
to Flying Lotus.
Interestingly, an album by an artist we've already done.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, like
this is
How many? Well,
Well, to be fair, John was gonna pick it. I know he wants his credit.
Do you ever get repeat guests? Like if you ever
we've had a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had one group.
Two.
Wall Street Players.
And Nate.
Oh, Nate.
And
but
he
was
Parker.
His own thing. He wasn't average intelligence. He was Nate.
So who has the record for the most appearances so far?
You're tied. It's a four-way tie.
It's a four-way tie?
It's a four-way tie.
Yeah.
I'm coming back next week.
Oh, crap.
I need to win things.
Of course you do.
Even arbitrarily stupid internet things.
We gave him tea. We're not going to get rid of him.
True.
No, it's true. Yeah,
This
we
tea
fed
is
him, gave him
delicious.
tea.
It's Tedley. Had a lot of work went into it.
No, Nelson was gracious enough to come back on this time, and this time is now after we've started letting our guests pick the album, so we don't have to inundate him with terribleness.
I figured the listeners might want to hear something good for a change. Ooh. So I brought along an album which I would be hard pressed to think that you guys are not going to like.
Well, why don't you tell us what that album is, Nelson?
That album is the newest release from Steam Powered Giraffe called Mark III, or MKIII for you sort of completists and very specific nerds out there. I am a huge fan of Steam Powered Giraffe, and their album just released last week. It's only a few days old at this point.
Yeah.
And I thought this would be a good opportunity to give it a listen and give it a review.
It actually was very hard to get a hold of as well. We could only find it on iTunes and Amazon, which is a shame because I so want a hard copy.
Well, it's only because it's brand new. It will start filtering through all the
Well,
portals.
can't you get it off their website?
Yes.
He didn't want to wait for the mail.
But that's too much effort for you?
No, I didn't have... It wouldn't have gotten here.
Oh, I see.
soon
Oh,
enough.
I see. I
wouldn't have been able to get it.
Okay.
But I have, in fact, ordered it, so I will be getting it. And what's great is that in the dust jacket is the lyrics, because I still can't even find lyrics for this.
Because it's new. We had the same problem with Hello Goodbye when we did it, because it was the week it come out,
right.
so John had some trouble finding lyrics.
So instead I kept listening to songs over and over and over again to hear some of the words.
Music reviewer problems.
In other words, we are worst when we are relevant. At 100% relevant.
That is a out-of-context quote if I've ever heard one. We are our worst when we are relevant. Moving on. So this is their third record. They have a clever naming convention of having the number of the record in the title.
Third studio record. They actually do have one or two live records from all the shows they've done. This is also the third time they've changed members as well. That's another big thing. The only core members that are sticking around so far have been Rabbit and the Spine.
Well, and the human members.
There's several of the human backup members.
Steve has been
the
part of the band
members
from the beginning.
Well, yeah, but when you're talking about the faces of the band,
yeah,
it's been different at least 3 times.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this time we have Hatchworth, which new vocalist. He also plays a few instruments. They all are multi-instrumentalists. And I have to say, right off the bat, I found him to be refreshing and a great compliment to the rest of their vocal work.
Yeah, me too.
Well, if nothing else is said about Steam Powered Giraffe, their harmonies are always fantastic. I mean, they're gifted singers.
Absolute strong suit.
Yeah, that's
all
the
things.
strongest thing about them. I mean, they have lots of other stuff, but their harmonies shine through
I did miss the John though. I mean,
Yeah.
he had a quality to his voice that was very unique,
Yeah.
and very much apart. And they must have known that and then integrated it into specifically to the 2 Cent Show.
Yeah.
That's sort of an ineffable thing, because yes,
Yeah.
he had a quality to his voice that was unique, and yet so do the Spines, so do the Rabbit,
Yeah.
and so does this new guy. So
Absolutely.
they really,
Absolutely.
that's kind of a prerequisite when they hold auditions, I imagine. Be unique, however vague that sounds.
Yeah.
Well, you got to come up with your own persona as well for the stage.
Exactly.
And
Right.
I have to love this new steam stove, copper-infused robot.
Yeah.
That's
that's-
his persona.
I
And
like
his
it.
mustache
I dig
goes
it.
great with it.
Hello.
Of course, because John's a mustache lover.
It's bright red.
Who
it's
isn't?
bushy. It's huge.
Well, this album
Sure.
does kind of hold a lot of themes running from like the 70s and 80s, when mustaches were, I think, at their all-time high. Next, maybe only to like 1890s mustachios. Excuse me.
Well,
Yeah.
they are automatons from the turn of the century, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
They are.
1870s and
Yes.
80s is
They
their
shift, they
hailing.
shift their decade here, because they were hugging the 20s and the 30s in their previous album. I think this is a good time to plug, just do a quick self-plug. For anyone interested in following along with this band chronologically, we did hold a review on their second album, The 2 Cent Show, back in episode 39. So if you just want to pause and go back and listen to that, then come back and listen to this. Hey, how's it going?
Did you like it?
Yeah!
And if you like that, you're gonna love this.
So let's get
What a
into
great plug.
let's get into this. Yes, we're plugging ourselves on our podcast. So if they haven't heard of us, but they're listening to us, then they can go find us.
You're allowed.
What's a
He
mood?
said we're allowed. There we go, we're allowed.
Right. It's fair. The first track is called Curtain Raiser. It's a very standard skit style intro. It sets up the kind of feel of this band as, entertaining and entertainers.
I'm pretty
It's dialogue.
sure it's,
Important to mention it's dialogue.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's actually either Steve and I think the other guy is Matt or Mike, who are the two humans who
Yeah.
play with these automatons, talking with a robot.
Yeah.
Who actually is interspersed with the rest of the theme work. I believe this robot is actually Gigi, the automatic giraffe that they have. You go on their website, you will learn all about the various individuals. Gigi is...
I remember considering, I wonder if that would happen during the actual live performance. Would a giant steam-powered giraffe actually march on at some point?
Well, it
Now-
doesn't.
Not yet.
No, but
But
that could be in the
could be
budget
a-
for the future.
Well, not with that attitude anyway. Yeah.
But it's a good little welcome to the show kind of a deal. Good setup.
It reminded me a lot like I don't know if any of you have done the Universal theme park. They're not rides, but they're like the experience.
Experience.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
And there's always
Tower of Terror.
Yes, and there's
Perfect
always
example.
somebody standing there at first who's going to introduce you to what it is you're about to experience. And it's often written very cheesily, and the jokes are very hackneyed. And this, but it's also done so very much in tongue in cheek and very very fun. That's what this reminded me of. I was
I
like,
think it's
okay.
All right,
Excellent
fire it
comparison.
up.
Yeah.
And
Excellent comparison.
flamethrower.
It's
Well, yeah, he's like, fire it up. And, no, turn off the flamethrowers.
Yeah, so it kind of sets up. All right, you're about to experience something. It's going to be weird. It's going to be wacky. You're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least that's the vibe I got.
That's the
from
only
it.
time where we actually get to hear the human Steve and Mike. We
True.
don't really hear them anywhere.
Well, that's not true.
Are they the creators?
Well, no, they
No.
sing and play instruments.
They do
Oh,
a
they
lot
do,
of
okay.
backup.
Yeah, Steve sings on Make Believe.
Oh.
He's the lead singer and guitarist on Make Believe.
And Make Believe is a song you can find on the 2 Cent Show, which these guys reviewed back in episode.
39!
There you go.
They love to
Shameless.
exploit this little talent of mine. It's very annoying.
Well, yeah, you have to have shame to be shameful. So clearly we're shameless.
True.
It's not annoying at all. It's very flattering.
Okay, well, after this cute introduction, we get into the first musical track, Steam Powered Giraffe.
The self-titled...
You know what? I'm
Band
actually
track,
a little
what?
surprised that it took them this long
To make a song called
A,
Steam
That's
Powered
true,
Giraffe.
because that usually happens on bands' first album. They might have, this is the name of our band. You know,
Yes,
you'll
ladies and
frequently
gentlemen,
have
we're
our self-titled.
Kablamachunk. Here's our first song called kablam-a-chunk, like that's
Right.
usually the first song out of
We're
the gate.
new. We're trying to pitch ourselves, but
Yeah.
they're clearly already very popular. So I don't.
But this becomes more of a reintroduction with the new vocalist, and I
Yes.
think it's really here that you get some of the very in-your-face harmonies that are going to be in this show that we're experiencing here, and it does a great job of showing who's new and what they do.
It's also for those who are fans of Steam Powered Giraffe and know their work. This is this is the moment where you hear something completely new and yet something very familiar.
It's
You know.
almost funky.
Yeah.
It's almost this. It's almost that. You can see the jump from the 30s to the 60s, the 70s.
But it's
here.
also like it's the band is a bit older. They're a bit wiser. They're more seasoned. They definitely know what they're doing now. And right out of the gate, they don't pull any punches, and they just they hit the ground running with this.
Yeah, I think that was a wise choice to open this track that way. It's sort of a kind of a sexy introduction. Sort of had that 60s, 70s guitar style to it. Very
Well, yeah, the
smooth,
solos
right?
were actually
Yeah.
really, really cool.
But that's just
Oh.
the introduction. Chronologically speaking here, that was just what lures you into the first time. But then right after that, it sort of drops back to Goofy.
yeah.
All right, and then you're sort of lured into this kids theme that's very
Warner
entertaining.
Brothers intro.
Again, well, Universal Studios, even just the way
Yeah.
Nelson said it. That's the type of comedy at play here, and that's the type of song making that they do. It's in that vein, which is why it's almost kind of strange that you get a sexy prelude to that.
Well,
it's kind of odd.
it was the piano work is now being introduced here, and they really did not go heavy on the piano in their previous work. The bass is really just great still, and I've always liked their bass.
Oh yeah.
You got some great guitar work. I mean, it was just showing the new composition of the instruments, and they really did. You can definitely see a higher level of studio work. From
Oh,
the
yeah, well,
previous
the
stuff.
production value on this is skyrockets above the last record.
At the same time, you lost a lot of their older acoustic style,
Yeah.
which first impression, just right off the bat, I was kind of disappointed.
And I'm going to say that I wasn't as jarred by it only because the harmonies between the a cappella thing, that kind of keeps it sort of wholesome
Well,
and
that's
acoustic
that-
in its way.
Well, and it was that familiar part that, even though the sound wasn't exactly the same, they still got the voices, they've still got those strong harmonies.
Yeah.
It keeps you engaged enough to accept the rest of it.
And I think, as a fan who's been following their work for a long time, it was just like I feel like I've kind of grown up with them.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's a much more mature sounding album, and this track specifically kind of like says, "Hey, we know what we're doing now. We're very confident. Enjoy the ride."
Well,
Well,
it's
and-
strange that we use that word mature, considering how many times we go back and forth between sort of a family-friendly sound, and
Very
yet there's
innocent.
maturity in the sound engineering itself. Got to make that distinction.
Yeah,
Very
right.
Yeah.
tricky.
It's a lot of heavy innocence in the theme work, in the actual presentation of what they're singing. They don't really veil it in very very much in the beginning part of the album. They don't veil like deeper meaning too much. They really do go right up front. Hey, this is happy. Be happy. It does have naivety is the wrong term, but it's innocent. It's childlike. And it's
Well, I'm not going to say that
themes.
naivete comes in with Hatchworth specifically,
Yeah.
because as when he's introduced in this album, I think he's accompanied he's defined by naivete,
Well,
by
he's-
being the newbie, and I think there's also something with his voice there. He's the highest pitched. He's a really, really high tenor, broaching into mid-range there, and it sounds very childlike.
Right, and so just so the viewers at home are following along,
Yeah.
you have the three faces of the band are the Spine, Rabbit, and the newest member, Hatchworth.
Hatchworth, right.
Hatchworth, yeah. And it goes from the opening theme of this show that they're creating into Mecco Amor, which it's
Well, I would say this is the true beginning of the album in a sense, because Steam Powered Giraffe only being a title track for the
Well,
band's
sure.
namesake is sort of a part of an intro, I think.
fair enough. I was blown away by this. I mean, it departs from what if you're a fan of their prior work, it departs from what you're used to. but it succeeds in creating something that's very evocative.
Oh, it succeeds in so many other ways.
Yeah.
Starts with that curtain raiser robot reciting a soliloquy or doing a Shakespearean introduction type of a piece. Just an aside, here we are setting the stage. And it really has some provocative lines like, chimera machinations create technological manticores. I love the symbology that's in some of these words. It's very poetic, but it's really not related to the song that follows up.
No, not at all.
No.
It's completely
Not
divorced.
necessarily.
Well,
This
it's
is
sort of-
like beat poetry that introduces this
Well,
song.
it's very Shakespearean in that way. I mean, oftentimes you'll have, Henry V, you have chorus coming out, "Oh, for a muse of fire,"
Yeah.
kind of like setting the stage and, setting the audience's expectations. And, this band is, and I'm going to say this a lot throughout when we talk about this record, this band is very confident. They feel like they know what they are doing.
It's this intro that I think really solidified that for me.
Yeah.
Just the certain lines here. Trumpets the progress omen of our future mirth. This is not the 2-cent show anymore, clearly.
No.
This is why...
Well, think
this is a must.
about the intro to Two Cent Show. It's the Steamboat Shenanigans, where it's just a fun, we're on an adventure, and here's the whole gang.
Yeah.
And here's a goofy story about a goofy guy. Rex Marksley, here he is.
Yeah.
Very clever lyrics within that, but either way, it's just kind of a fun romp. This song does not begin as a romp, though. This is a serious... It is. As John said, a soliloquy.
It's their stake in the ground. It's their call to action. It's their moment to kick off.
You do got to make that distinction, though, because the remainder of the track, it does take more of a pop turn.
Yeah,
they
it
don't
was
stick with the serious soliloquy,
Oh goodness, no!
Yeah.
Oh no!
Yeah, the track was very much driven by this kind of synth robo-pop, if you will. Like, it was very much...
Yeah.
It was just
like
very much this
Robo-pop.
very grounded in pop, and in the same way also that by towards the end of the song, if you don't know the name of the song, you're deaf, because they repeat Mecto
yeah.
Amor 50 times.
Yeah, but it
Maybe.
does a great job.
More. It's like every little syllable's got to be pounded into the ground.
I'm going to get a little deep here, but they're talking about how society loves a shiny new. And this is something shiny new in this album. This album is something for them that is the new product. This is what they consider like their groundbreaker, the iPod of theirs.
Yeah.
From CDs and MP3. Just something like the new product, where they want to go. Something shiny and new.
Well,
and
it's
Mecto
tough.
Amor really goes through that.
It's tough for me to take this track out of the soliloquy. It's still a powerful intro for this track. It kind of sets the stage, so you have to tie together the theme work. For instance, there was that line about what do you do when you find your creator's bag of bones. I mean, which of course, when you consider what they are, robots, you assume that it's probably a bag of just this and that. It's a tech bin, essentially.
Yeah.
And they make references,
Leftover
what do you do but
motherboards.
assimilate your laptops.
Right, well,
consume
it's
your
like-
laptops,
or
assimilate your mobile phones. It's very... I can't take it so simplistically when you.
Well, no, I mean
that.
considering that their shtick is like they are the Kiss of the steampunk world. It's these three performers who have taken on personalities of automatons, and their whole point of view about the world and the art they create is through the lens of these robots, these mechanical beings, right? And then so you have the very surfacey sort of theme of Mecco Amor on that level. But I think just like Steve said, it goes so much more deeper, and they take some. No, wait, you're Steve. Who are you?
John.
I wasn't
Fine.
gonna say it. He's a guest. He's allowed.
No,
Okay.
I'm not allowed. And then as soon as I said Steve, everybody started looking at each other like, who's he talking to?
I'm sorry. Returning
yes.
guest.
What was my point? My point is, I love this band. Go on. No,
We threw you. I'm sorry.
Completely threw him
no.
off.
What was I going to say? Oh, that in this song they are taking some very, very bold risks musically. It changes it changes several times into different feels of music and genres, and For me, it worked. I don't know if that's true for you guys, but it was a definite journey. It's almost like it's saying, this ain't your granddaddy's 2-cent show. We're the new and improved Steam Powered Giraffe.
I'll buy that.
Yeah,
It worked for me in a series of ways, and I think that's part driven by that juxtaposition between the very simplistic, naive, family-friendly overall sound combined with the occasional gripping line that really requires a bit more studious listen.
Well, this album has something where if you're not paying attention, you could miss it. Like, there's a lot of moments that, on face value...
See, I remember you saying that earlier, and it's just one of those things that goes back and forth for me, because there are certain tracks here which I do think are somewhat face value, and it's okay that they're face value because of the simple message that they convey. And then, yes, there are other, maybe specific lines here and there. But especially in terms of the manner in which they sing. They're so close, right up against the microphone. I had a term I always go back to, under the magnifying glass, because a recording engineer I used to work with back in college once used this term, and it was like, that's an interesting way to put it. Under the magnifying glass for a vocalist who was right up against the mic, so where everything is so clear you couldn't help but miss it.
Right.
Which is sort of strange to say that, well, you could listen, but I think it's just because of the sheer amount of lyrics that are in this album. There's so much going on. It's not that you can't hear it. It's not that it's being drowned out by any particular instrument. Or not. They're not. They are the forefront in almost every single track.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot to listen to.
It is dense. It is a jam-packed full of just wonderful nuggets.
Exactly.
Nuggets of wonderfulness.
Yeah, wonderful nuggets.
A perfect example of that depth is in Hatch Fever,
which is the very next track. Yeah.
It's the introduction of Hatchworth.
This is getting to know the new character, but they also introduce a very much a focus on their kind of family friendly in this song, because he's almost like a child. He doesn't understand a lot about the world, and he's confused and has lots of questions, and
he goes through the motions of speaking about the Spine and Rabbit are going back and forth. We got a new toy. It's a man-shaped box. Let's open it up and power it on up. And the first note that Hatchworth does is like a 25-second bellowing, just drawn-out note, and it's it's whoa! It's just
beautiful.
A whoa
it's
moment.
It's a beautiful moment. Yeah,
he's the way he hit that. I couldn't. I don't know many people that could. It's just amazing. He had that vocal strength.
And it's also, again, there's that quality to his voice also. The fact that he's in the very high tenor range there. It's something that it's definably new, if you're familiar with Steam Powered Giraffe's previous work. So it kind of works against the Spine really perfectly, because the Spine typically takes the baritone.
Yeah.
And now you have this counter in the high register, which is just as strong as the Spine is when he's in his lower registers, despite the fact that he can also shift around as needed. But it fills it out really, really well. But just the joke there of having to actually sell to your audience the fact that we have a new member. That's hilarious.
Well, no, it's even
and
better.
They do it so bluntly.
Yes.
They don't even try to hide the fact. It's awesome.
We ordered a new member on Amazon. Here he is. We're cracking the box open.
But when they boot him up and he starts speaking, he's speaking nonsensical. He talks about, yes, I want to get into your heart. I want you to take open that chest cavity. Like, wait. That's kind of morbid. And he's like, you know what? That's a good point. Kids, don't do that at home.
Don't do that.
We want you to
be
stay
kind
around.
to birds. Eat your vitamin soup. There's so much it's PBS robots at this point.
It is the best intro to a band member ever. It is hilarious. It is funny.
Well, because they're also up front with it. A lot of other bands like take Van Halen, who kept switching their lead singers. They avoid it. They don't say anything about it. They just do it. Whereas this, they're going, well, we have a new member. Here he is.
Well, I think it's just a classic Steam Powered Giraffe, that they never miss an opportunity for a good joke, ever.
Yeah.
And this is a joke in song form. They did a joke.
Now, just to talk about the music aspect in this area. Well, first of all, actually, an inflection aspect, because it's another thing. It's also the way in which they say certain lines that I think makes this band so unique. Not just the fact that they're robots, because of course they're really, really good singers, and that's not something you'd immediately associate with the robot. But for instance, just the imagery in the process of opening the box.
Yeah.
How they have to describe every little emotion to lure you into
The
to
fire's
their world.
burning, we're boiling the water, let's get it in the stove.
Yeah.
Right, and then taking off the box like butter and everything. It's so enunciated.
The cardboard's like toast, which I never heard before.
I know!
But that's actually a pretty good symbolism right there. That's a pretty accurate description.
It's like it's
perfect.
basically like an unboxing video
For like
in
a
music
video,
form.
yeah,
You
toy
know,
or something.
it's like this would be the steam powered, or rather, yeah, like the steampunk equivalent to an unboxing video.
And maybe I'm reading into it a little bit too much, but I think there's also something to be said there for the robot personality, the robot experience. For instance, trying to feed this experience through the robot mind. What are you going to compare it to? Well, let me search around. What can I compare it to? Nothing anyone else would ever compare it to. So, toast, butter. That's
Yes.
like opening a box is like, great.
Yes.
But
Great
what's
job.
great is that the Spine and Rabbit are going back and forth as they do. They really are kind of operating on the same wavelength.
Yes.
And Hatchworth really does throw a wrench in this.
Yeah.
He does a great
He doesn't
job.
have the frame of reference.
No.
So everything for him is just fresh, new.
And it's great to see how they really do mesh them into their duality into a trilogy.
Yeah.
And it's just awesome. And the punchline is the whole joke. That's what's great. We were laughing the whole time.
Just some really wonderful, like all of the asides that Hatchwork ends up making about, you know, be kind to birds and eat your veg. All of that stuff is just said so matter of factly, and just like completely runs on. He doesn't even take a breath, and it just becomes more hilarious the more he says.
You want to love me like you're catching a disease, like you're getting a fever. But it wouldn't really be bad. It'd actually be kind of good. So it's really not like a disease at all. Like that kind of a rambly nature.
All that
Yeah.
stuff. And the reason they're able to pull all this off is, of course, because from a music perspective, this is Broadway style. They can cram all this information in because they're meshing the two together, the music with telling and narrative.
Well, this band is pretty much like a modern vaudeville act in the fact that they do so much on stage.
Well, see, that's funny, because we used the term vaudeville for the 2 Cent Show quite a bit, because it kind of sounded like it was in that era, like it came out of the 20s and 30s, and then all of a sudden here, we get a much more modernized style. Still not so modern that it's like, you know, right recently, but like a 70s swing piano rock kind of track.
It
This is
still
what I
has
got
a
from this.
show aspect, but it's becoming more theatrical.
And the funny thing
which is weird because the first and second albums were both very theatrical.
Oh, yeah.
But this is setting a different type of theater.
Well, sure.
Different type
Vaudeville
of stage.
is just as theatrical as Broadway. That's the thing. In terms of development, also, piano rock kind of did develop out of a resurgence of ragtime, and ragtime was all over vaudeville. So it's kind of a perfect answer to the 2 Cent Show as far as discography is concerned.
Absolutely, and I said this earlier, and I just it feels like like they've taken their concept out of excuse me, like the tent show essentially.
Yep.
They moved it into a theater, and now it's like an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, where it's fun and over the top and silly and crazy.
And that's the story of ragtime right there. It used to be in like burlesque houses, and then all of a sudden, it's on Broadway.
Exactly. And it just so very impressive.
Yeah, it's a nice jazz loungy kind of track. It's even in terms of the duets, the call and response nature, the walking bass, all of that. It blends together really, really well. And the comedy trumps it all.
Yeah.
Moving on to track 5, Away Into Your Heart.
I like the tinny guitar in the introduction. That was something that really gripped me right away.
Yeah.
My biggest problem with this song, especially after hearing it a second time, and I like the song, it's not a bad song, is it's one of those songs where you hear it and you think it's going to A and it goes to C instead. And I really wanted to see where A went. C was okay, but I wanted to see where A went. It started as this kind of, you know, Beatles-esque almost song, you know, very classic rock.
I'm very, very with Matt on this particular track. It started out like the immediate song that came to mind was the track "Don't Let Me Down" by the Beatles, which had Billy Preston. My favorite version is when they're singing the rooftop concert, but that's neither here nor there. Either way, chord-wise, style-wise, it's almost to a T. Like not quite knockoff level, but it's really, really in that realm. And I kind of did want to see where that went because it's not something I hear every day since the Beatles.
And then there's a hard stop, and it becomes a country song.
Yeah,
pretty much for the rest of the track.
Straight up country track, and that's a strange shift. That doesn't work. That doesn't blend quite as well to me as some of the previous examples of their genre shifting, genre blending did.
I did accept it more than I think you two. I really did enjoy the way it went into this country theme work, because it was more reminiscent of the 2 Cent Show. It was blending in their earlier work into this new sound. I enjoyed it because it was very heartfelt, talking about how they really starting to interact with the fans and about the fans' acceptance of their theme, of what they do. And this is really just a call out to all the people that have made them popular, that do love them. And it actually becomes even a more personalized, talking about how they are sort of becoming been part of relationships. I mean, it does undergo some changes.
Oh, it does undergo changes later, and even
in the lyrics.
Musically.
But lyrically, I mean, it does start as sort of a macro scale. Thank you for welcoming us into your heart, and then it becomes a little more personalized. Thank you specifically for welcoming me into your heart.
It's
and
hard.
I really enjoyed it.
I almost want to equate the music shift to that theme, just to see if that works well together. It's tough, though. I guess one of the main problems that I did have with it was just the fact that, the guitar technique used in the intro was very soulful, very, very soulful. So I was lured immediately. Okay, they had me at a hook, and then maybe it's just when they shifted to that country figuration, it sounded a little bit weak by comparison, a little bit listless just from the music standpoint. Vocals still amazing. That's kind of a running thing throughout.
We're going to keep repeating that.
Exactly. But, I don't know. It just dragged in a sense, that country section. But it's not to say that it stays there. It shifts around a little bit.
And there was much better transition to the rock part C.
Yeah, we get like a part C. We get like a third movement
But that's really... you get hints of it in album 1, and you get a little more of it in the 2 Cent Show. And here... again, they're just taking bigger, bolder risks. Instead of just hinting at it, they're just fucking going for it.
Oh, sure.
And
I mean, I'm the first to respect more than anyone's a band who wants to push their boundaries by making tracks that incorporate more sections, more more complexity, more diversity within them. But even between those two words, complexity and diversity, there's often a little bit of a split. Complexity, great. Throw in as much complexity as you want. I'm probably going to get off on it. But then when you take diversity, it's a little bit of a weird choice, because then you have to think about what is the goal of the track. Where is their focus? What is the center? What are you anchored toward?
I
and it
think
started to become a little confusing as the track went on.
For me, the whole song for me becomes about this almost like this anthem for not giving up, because the phrase. Keep on trying gets repeated over and over and over again. And I guess to me, it didn't... that to me at least validated what they were doing, because they're not going to give up. Yeah. They're going to keep trying, and they're going to keep doing it, and they're going to figure it out. That's so those changes for me worked, at least thematically, for the song. And so I guess I was less bothered by it than you two were.
Yeah, I think for me it's not like it's a bad song. There's nothing bad on this album. Yeah. It's just, for me, it didn't go where I wanted it to, so that kind of pulled me out of it a bit.
Okay, that's
but in certain of these, bad is not even a word that will enter this podcast.
It's okay.
It's no, not even okay. That's the thing.
It's better than okay.
Musically, almost all these songs are pretty phenomenal. It comes down to artistic choice at that point, and that's really
it's personal preference.
Those are the podcasts I prefer to have.
Yeah, of course.
So
a great
artistic
album
choice,
a great album with depth,
with artistic discrepancies, maybe, or at least open to debate.
Yeah.
Moving on to track 6, Ghost Grinder. So this song for me is when I felt the most back at home in my seat with the Steam Powered Giraffe.
This felt a lot like Suspender Man. This really had
Scary World.
Scary World is a great illusion.
Oh yeah.
And so Ghost Grinder is pretty much essentially the song about
ghosts.
About death and ghosts.
No. The spirit
you can't just
of a
leave
dead.
it at the overall.
Well, no,
you
but
gotta talk about the intricacies.
Yes.
This is the spirit the spirit of a musician inhabiting a organ grinder, the old school,
Yes.
just spin the crank the handle machine.
That curiosity machine you would find on the corner block.
Where the monkey is dancing. I mean, no, that's exactly what it is.
But the funny thing
it
about
starts nice and slow, and really goes full B-movie creep, which is just awesome. That's why I love Scary World.
But the funny thing about it going like this song starting with that slow build and then going all out is that it's not, the sound isn't what you'd expect. It kind of was more of a disco-y kind of sound, kind of funky in a way.
Yeah.
But it was still a storytelling campfire ghost story song.
I wouldn't be thrown back if this was on an old school Tales of the Crypt. Like, it really was.
Or at the very least, Goosebumps.
Yeah, it was. It tried horror, so it did B movie horror.
Well,
by
some stretch, this shift is almost stranger than the previous track.
Yeah.
And its shift. But it's a little bit more consistent with what you'd expect them to do.
Yes.
To
Yes.
sort of
It's a
twist
little-
something scary into something absolutely goofy and fun.
Yeah.
That's consistent.
They got the witch's cackle going on at the
Yeah.
transition, and they keep throwing that in there, and it's eerie.
It's just to go consecutively. There's some pretty interesting things because it opens up with just that accordion and a very tinny keyboard playing just a very simple kind of a dirge-like ostinato that just it repeats over and over, and then you get this darker piano that enters in with all the chords, and as it moves through it, it starts getting very, very mournful almost. You know, that level of dark that we've brought this to, and then phase 2.
It goes to Crazy Town.
Yeah. It's like everything just starts, you get this transition is like the static and the drums, which, you know, is a pretty good way of evoking the ghosts, and then this falling bass, and bam, we're in our pop disco track now. Very
It's
odd.
no longer grr, it's rah, I'm a monster. I mean,
Of course, their harmonies follow like the same mood. It perpetuates pretty much the same mood. It brings in the human element, and they're always pretty consistent in that regard.
This was the first track that made me very aware that this is an album you can't listen to casually.
No.
You need this, you know, they demand your full attention because they are doing some pretty complex things.
We always go back and forth on that, though. That's a funny
well,
one.
at least for this track. At least for this track.
Yeah.
At least for this track. This track was exceedingly complex, but very easy to follow if you were paying attention.
I'm going to agree with you in that regard.
Yeah.
I still think you could gauge because, you know, we keep going back to the whole kids' music thing.
Right,
Whether
right,
kids
right.
can really latch on to this. Because there are moments here where it almost seems like it's 100% aimed at kids. And that's
Right.
that.
Yeah.
When you come to this track, yes, it's scary, it's a little dark and everything, but I still would argue that's kid-friendly in a way. Because
Oh,
every
absolutely.
kid should have that exposure.
Absolutely. I don't think it's so gratuitously like off the deep end that that people wouldn't be able to listen to it.
Right,
also-
but from a child perspective,
Yeah.
though, you have to consider how deeply are they going to be listening to this track? They'll be getting sort of an overall tone, and I do think it works on that level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it needs to be delved into, like, active listening. You know, I can't picture a 7-year-old sitting there with his headphones really dissecting
Well,
this track.
no.
Some do.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's
I'm
right.
but at the same time, this song really showcases their newer, higher level of production. They really are splicing and taking different instruments and really putting together more complicated themes, more complicated chord work in their songs, and I'm really enjoying that trend.
Well, the complexity, I think, is even more in their harmonies than anything else.
Yeah.
I even want to backtrack just a little bit back to A Way Into Your Heart, because there was a point there where some of their harmonies felt like they were taking the front stage. Well, of course, they always take the front stage, but they were fronting this track in a way that while it was going on with the country riff in the background, the harmonies were going through these one phase is in, one phase is out. They were overlapping each other constantly, which was very complex in and of itself, which may have been why they didn't need to really clutter it up with too much, which is why they kept the basic country background, and that was that. This track, they almost do something similar, because they sometimes keep similar motifs in the background, while in the forefront, they're going nuts. Between the three of them, it's that one trade-off, another trade-off. Now you're front stage. Now I'm front stage, right? As they engage in dialogue. And then beyond that, the extra layer of complexity is the overall form of the piece. The fact that there's different sections, the large for the macro scale. So, yeah. a lot going on in some areas. It's tough to talk about.
Also, I'm noticing more on this album than in the previous album. On 2 Cent Show, they did a lot of alternating, whereas one sings, then the next sings, then the next sings, and then all three of them sing.
This is it.
Yeah,
like, this is the
that's
Spine's
what I'm
part,
saying.
this is Rabbit's part, this is the John's part.
And then they sang together.
Right.
This, there's a lot more overlapping and a lot more
Yeah.
intermingling, which I like. I think and yet they still have those moments where they get to shine on their own, but it's not as not precognitive, but it's not as like specifically pinpointed and placed.
Preordained.
I guess. Sure.
That would
Well,
work.
no,
That
I mean,
would work.
it was, I mean, they can fall into a formulaic kind of scheme where,
Right.
I'm going to sing, you're going to sing, you're going to sing, and now we all sing together.
Right.
This was very creatively
cumulative
loose
effort,
and
definitely.
a collaborative effort on this.
And I kind of enjoy that because that lends itself to stage work a
Absolutely.
lot more.
Which
is what they're going for.
If you can make people believe on a studio record that it's practically improvised, that's damn good.
Yeah.
And that's what they do on stage, too. Seeing them perform live, a lot of it doesn't seem scripted, and I guarantee it is.
Oh, absolutely.
But a lot of it feels very off the cuff and not scripted.
A great example of that is the next track. Please explain. This track, focusing on the lyrics, you're going to be assaulted with words.
And a peppered.
And that might actually be a line. I don't even know.
It's that kind of out of contextness that's in this song. It's just so all over the place because it's essentially designed as Hatchworth is asking to be explained everything, essentially. He doesn't understand
What's that?
anything.
What's that?
Yeah.
And he starts spitting out words, and he says things like, your verbs should go with nouns.
This is the quintessential.
I love it's very childlike, it's very on the nose, but he's right. Verbs should go with nouns.
Yeah.
You're very passionate about that.
I
aren't you,
love
John?
putting verbs and nouns together.
One would say it's a pastime for you,
Yes,
practically. Yeah.
indeed.
He doesn't do it well, though.
Well,
Running.
Gotta
Who
be at the top
does,
of your
really?
class in
Yes,
that.
Who
true.
does?
Right.
This felt to me very reminiscent of like Oscar and Hammerstein, kind of like I am the model of a modern man in general. Like it'd be like there's and all
Gilbert
of those.
and Sullivan, you mean?
I'm sorry, thank you.
That's right.
Oh Lordy, yes, Gilbert and Sullivan.
Correction.
Third base.
Yes, it's the Abbott and Costello third base. It's the Pirates of Penzance.
Oh, yeah.
It's all of these wonderful. It's the importance of being earnest. It's about it's language.
That's a lot of theater we just got assaulted with.
Yes,
No, no,
well,
but
because
it's
ultimately it's a dialogue with someone who doesn't understand the basic meanings of things, and so they have to explain it to him in a way where they're not.
Using the
Using the-
right.
I think of all of those, the importance of being earnest is probably the best comparison
Yeah.
of all of the above, because
Yeah.
that is all about wordplay and really dissecting what the word truly means
Yes.
when you sit and focus on it. And that's everything that a child asks. Kids are always asking things like that. What does this mean? What does that mean? And every once in a while, you just have to sit there and how am I going to? I've never thought about how to explain.
Like, you're asking me questions I don't even
Yeah.
understand. And that comes across in this. And the fact that they chose a Motown style musically to
Yeah.
go with for this
Yeah, which is-
was just an interesting pairing. But it really worked very well for this kind of, like, you could almost picture them snapping and dancing side to side while explaining this. It felt very Broadway.
Definitely.
It felt very, what the hell, Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, sure.
You
Yeah.
just...
More theater.
But the perfect example is the line the Spine says, which is, if a point is moot, what's a moot anyway? And that really does explain what they're trying to do in the song. It really does a great job. And I love that line.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
To be honest, what's a moot? It's a great, like, nobody ever thinks about this sort of stuff.
Right.
And we're getting it presented from, the child's perspective.
And...
But-
And this is this piece is a wonderful showcase of their typical humor, you know, and how they see the world and how they interact with it, both as artists and performers, but specifically through the lens of these robots that they've created. It was great.
It's either a track for linguistics majors or not for linguistics majors,
Right.
depending upon how you
Whether
whether you're accepting of these
yes,
things.
yes.
You'll either be very cold about it and have stone cold answers about this is not entertaining in the slightest.
True. It was great.
Moving on to the next track, She Said Maybe. So this song is so sweet. I think I got a cavity.
Oh my god, yes. I think I need insulin shots.
This is the pinnacle song for the overly romantic
I
nerd.
got diabetes from
This is
Diabetes.
It's the courtesy fallen in love track, but not.
Because
not
it's
really.
Well, the great thing about
Because
it
of the
lyrically
obvious.
is this perspective that they're singing about getting the courage to talk to this girl, to ask her out, but then she said maybe, and what it means.
Right.
It doesn't mean
John is
yes,
just
but it
beaming
doesn't
through
mean no. I love this song because, you know what? Maybe is being celebrated here. Uncertainty is being celebrated here, and that's something that should...
no, actually, what's being celebrated here is the chance. It's the possibility.
And-
you know, because sometimes yes is too fucking terrifying, and sometimes no is equally heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You know.
She
So
said maybe. No, I don't know. I kind of like to take it slow.
Yeah.
That's kind of like...
But it's not. No, it's not
more
said that
realistic. This is a
No,
realistic
yes,
This is
track for me.
absolutely.
She said maybe. I like to take it
Well,
slow.
that's the joke.
It's so
That's
much
the joke.
enthusiasm.
Because it has the enthusiasm of any old 50s doo-wop track, which would normally always be talking about the positives. She
Sure.
said yes, I'm going to the prom tonight, da-da-da. Everything's always positive and happy.
But this
it
is
seems.
this
Probably
is
not,
really
but-
just heartfelt. I worked up the courage. I gave it a shot, and they do it so well. With that twist on the joke, they do it so well. I just had to fall in love with this song.
But I do agree with you. It is. I mean, it is grounded in I guess a reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's delivered with such saccharine sweetness that I, as a listener, I'm like, yeah, they got a maybe. Good
Yeah.
for
You
them.
go. Yeah.
You know.
Well, when you hear that one too many major chords over and over again, you're kind of being force-fed. You know,
Yes.
hey, way to go.
That's like awesome, guys. You did good work.
Yeah.
I mean, this is...
They are romanticizing the term of ambiguity. That takes a lot.
Yeah,
A lot of that.
and this is one of those songs that there's really, I mean, it's very much what it is. There's
has
nothing
great-
to really overanalyze.
No. There's
Other
something
than
to
that,
analyze.
lyric.
There is something. The piano was really good in this as well, and that really got the point across for me.
Well, it was
really,
part of those major chords and that saccharine sweet feel. The piano really pushes that.
Yes,
Old them
and it
major
did-
chords.
It was a
Yeah.
little bit of different too because it kind of made the piano forefront, and they hadn't really done that before. You get a lot of bass work, a lot of guitar work, and a lot of drum work, which is a band, quote unquote.
It is?
Yes. But this, they're doing
It's
piano. They're integrating more instrumentation, not just
Right.
the electronica they did earlier, but this is really taking a keyboard piano forefront.
Oh, that's
and I
right. It
love
really was front and center on this one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I love the way they're interspersing new instruments in their music, or not just new, but really changing up their lineup. And
Well,
I love that.
They also hop within a period of years here, you know, between the 50s and the 80s. They're not 100% in one, not 100% in the other.
But they're
'Cause
kinda
when they
dabbling.
go more heavy rock, then they broach the 80s. But then when they do this doo-wop style, they're back in the 50s. The previous track, Please Explain, was all about the Motown, so
Yeah.
it's kind of in the middle there. They like the era, but they have, you know, they can stretch.
They,
They can stretch their
absolutely.
boundaries.
They are definitely influenced and by all of these different genres.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's Broadway, essentially. It's kind of just one big melting pot of
Oh, sure.
everything. And
Oh, sure.
Well, also, one thing I really liked about this song was actually how well it was followed up by track 9. So, Go Spine Go, John summed it up really easily. If you're a fan of How I Met Your Mother, it's the Have You Met Ted song.
This is the earnest, hey, here's my friend.
But
I'm gonna filter this just through one other little description. If anyone's familiar with Monty Python, this is kind of the Brave Sir Robin track. You have your
Yeah.
little troubadour at your side, who's basically telling of your tale, and occasionally he spouts out lyrics that you're not 100% down with. You're not 100% sanctioning those lyrics, so you turn your head. Wait, I'm what? I'm doing what now?
And
I'm dying. What?
it's
not
a
my
great
tale.
it's a great faux anthem. It's not really an anthem, but it's put out in this kind of way that you're
Okay, this is Rabbit and Hatchworth going back and forth and singing lines
About the
telling
spine.
telling you about how great the spine is, and they'll sing, "He'll be there when you need him, and he'll be time permitting."
Yeah.
Just like Deadpan, you should use the plunger.
Yeah.
or something like that. And they start doing something really, really witty halfway through the second verse. They
Yes.
turn it into...
It is the greatest poop joke in the history of poop jokes.
Get a little background with this. Because, from a musical perspective, I think most people are probably focused on the chord at a certain point. They all harmonize together, and it's just this beautiful, beautiful note. Every single time they go through the verses, there's this one chord that's like,
Yeah.
Probably one of the most beautiful sounds in the entire album. And then... what word are they going to use to emphasize this next chord? And what is it? Diarrhea! Diarrhea!
And they sing about how he's got horrible diarrhea, and the Spine is constantly correcting them about how
I'm a robot.
he can't
I
have
do
diarrhea.
not get diarrhea. I cannot eat. But then the point is really driven home in the third verse, where they're like, no, he doesn't have diarrhea, he's a spy. And he's outfitted with technology that can overthrow governments. And they're like, no, he doesn't do that. He likes to eat pie. He's like, well, I can't eat pie. No, he eats lots of pie, and it causes diarrhea.
It's a wonderful, wonderful song.
He'll punch a bear for you.
It's just one punchline after another,
Yeah.
and it's really fun. It's the classic Abbott and Costello relationship where you have the comic and you have the straight man.
Always got the straight man.
And the Spine plays the perfect straight man to the wild antics of the rabbit.
The baritone always ends up playing the
You know.
straight man.
And he does. This is what he really has always done for the band.
This
Yeah.
song represents what comes across very much in their live show, where the Spine is trying to move the concert forward, identify with the fans, get along with everyone, and the other two clowns are bringing random props on stage,
The rabbit-
screwing with him.
What was the...
So when they started talking about westerns, Rabbit goes in the middle of Spine sentence, "Ooh, I'll need a bigger hat," and runs off stage. Then 5 minutes later comes back with a giant foam hat. And he goes, "I don't think it's big enough," and then runs off and gets another hat. All while the Spine is trying to deliver exposition about Rex Marksley, the song they want to do. But they can't get to the song because Rabbit keeps running off stage.
And it just shows the dualities they have going on there, the differences in the personalities. And this whole album, especially up to this point, has really just showcased... It's explaining the characters. And
Yeah.
it's doing a great job of explaining the characters through the various stories they're trying to get across here. And it's just...
It was a whole lot of fun. It was a
Yeah,
whole
and
lot
it's
of
not
fun.
really like showcasing any one of them over the others as a whole, but like each song, they're really just getting their own part.
Well, this is also the point in the album where I started to realize, as if I didn't realize it earlier, that we were going to have to rate this in a little bit of a different way, and that is the comedy album. I really do think this falls under a comedy album, perhaps equally as it does a legit straight-up music album. They're kind of both as relevant. You can't really take one without the other. It's not just a tiny little element of the track where it's like, oh yeah, that had a little ha-ha. That's typical in music. It is the act. So it's a different kind of animal.
Well, this is their first album where they're really representing their live show within the works of the record. This record was heavily influenced by what they do on stage. Whereas other albums could have stood alone as just, these are songs that we're doing. This one is really where their stage personas and their act, especially as on stage, comes through.
There's dialogue in the vast majority of these tracks. I mean, most albums don't feature straight-up dialogue between two people. A duet is one thing. This is a conversation in their duet, so...
And this isn't just, this isn't like a full story, one full story as we've gotten in some other album arcs. This is really sort of a progression of just a different group of stories, but it does have a unifying feel towards it. It does have a very solid flow as far as a single piece is going along here. It's doing a good job of really feeling like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 of a group of snippet shows.
Yeah.
Sort of...
Adding to
it's
that
got-
vaudeville feel, this kind of, vignettes, if you will, of different little performances.
Yeah.
But
there's a stronger tie-in here, but I do think there are several vignettes within it. And one of the vignettes we do get is the next track, track 10, Roller Skate King. This kind of goes hand in hand with the whole Rex Marksley bit on the previous album, where you're telling a story about a guy. He's kind of awesome. That's about the end of it.
Right. But
No, he is kind of awesome, and those words are in the.
But the difference is this time around is with a song like Rex Marksley, it's very much this epic tale of this guy who fought outlaws and made the West back.
It was the epic Western tall tale. This
So you get more for your buck.
Yeah.
This was kind of an epic disco tall tale, and it didn't quite mesh the same way.
It
The
was
roller skate king. I mean, how many ways is that really going to live up to a cowboy fighting? You know,
Well, it's also, this was a theme for a TV show. This wasn't a whole movie. This was
it's sorta
just
like-
the theme. If there was a TV show about the roller skate king, this would have been the theme for it.
It fits. Yes, it fits the theme of this album. It's
This
still-
was
you
this
can't
was
help
the first and only track on here that I felt was
Down?
weak compared to what else was
What
going
we'd heard
on.
so far.
A
Yeah.
little
You know,
down, a
but
little bit down.
But the thing is, but I'm not saying it's a bad song at all, because it is fun as to listen to.
There you go.
It is really fun to listen to. Is there a bleep in there now? Nice.
There's like 3 now.
Nice. There's it's fun to listen to, even though it doesn't progress their narrative.
It's a breather. This really,
Yes.
I see this, and because of what comes later, I see this as a great interlude between this and the latter part of the album. Because we're going to go under a real big tonal shift in the theme and in the sound.
That's true.
So, for that part, for what Roller Skate King does, well, yeah, not the best song on the album, but a good breather. A really good breather for the theme that we're going
like
on.
like an intermission, this is we're about to start Act 2.
And it's very reminiscent of, even though there was more impact in this on Two Cent Show, it's very reminiscent of Make Believe.
Sure.
It had that fun feel,
Prelude to
kind
a
of
dream,
dancing.
make believe.
Yeah.
that
it,
duality.
it reminded me of Ice Cream Man. Just
Yeah.
kind of like here's a dude. Here's why he's awesome.
That's it.
And that's it.
He's awesome. There we go. Moving on.
And we
Let's
like
end
ice,
it the way we started it.
yeah, and we like ice cream. That's it. That's really all they have to say about the matter.
But it did have that sort of la 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 la
Yeah.
la la
Yeah.
la 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 la.
It did have that kind of bouncy feel.
That thing.
which which led well into track 11, I'll Rust With You, which was this another so sweet it gave me a cavity, but this also
This is a different kind
But in a
of...
different way. I mean, for me, it felt like
It was more heartfelt.
it was
Yeah.
heartfelt. Like it wasn't like saccharine sweet for me. It was like, oh,
yeah.
like looking at two 90-year-old married couple walking down the street hand in hand.
But it's not
Exactly.
that. It's not that. It's I'll rust with you. So you're picturing
old
two
robots standing in
you're
a
picturing
field.
two robots, post-apocalyptic, walking hand in hand. Everything else is dead, but they're still together.
Yes,
Like
Yes.
you could go that far.
I want to hop to the end of this track in order to really bring that to fruition, which is why I just cannot take the route of the word sweet. I mean,
Yeah.
sweet is
Yeah.
not... I think that's not appropriate for this particular track. This is the sad, but, relatable display of death. This is death.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not sweet. I mean, which is interesting to take the route that a robot is talking about. Because I think of Data from Star Trek. He's not going to die. Robots can be eternal, potentially. But you don't know that because they could just have the plug pulled on them and then never be reinitiated again, right? Then they're gone.
Well,
and then all can you do but rust.
Yeah.
So
There is
it's kind of nice to take a little play on that. Rust in peace. That's pretty
The
clever.
Cadillac, yeah.
Well, yeah,
Let's
it's-
drive our Cadillac off into the ocean. I mean, there's some symbolism that you really wouldn't
But
normally get in a love heartfelt.
right. But if
because
you
the way
understand,
it's turned.
if you understand that it's robots talking about how they want to spend the rest of their time on this planet
Yeah.
as a sentient being,
Instead
it's
of
like
hearts
I want to
and
rust
veins,
with you.
it's
Yes.
CPUs and wires.
Well, that's the thing. Do you think it's all just about the progression of their life, or the end of their life, or after it?
So where I got sweet from though with this, and I'll get into your question, is the style and way it came across as this 50s doo-wop, almost Grease style song, which is where the sweetness comes along. But you're right, the song takes an adult turn at the end because the last 30 seconds of the song is just wind across a field sounding.
That's the thing.
It gave it a very less sweet, more sad sound, and I think it's really trying to touch on you know,
It put
sometimes
it in perspective for me.
yeah,
because otherwise I might not have been able to, like, otherwise I probably could have gone with it. Yes, the whole tone of the track is pretty happy. It kind of goes in with the same tone as She Said Maybe, and maybe even Please Explain. It's, you know, that kind of 50s era style happiness and a little bit doo-woppy. But it's just, when you consider the lyrics and when you consider the note they left it on, just the wind blowing by, I can't help but just picture a pile of metal that was once sentient and now is not.
Two completely denuded robotic hands still clutching one
That's right.
another.
Until something falls.
Robotic gears collapsed within one another's grip. I mean, yeah.
Is this the
Theater.
But really, that's the makings of a really wonderful sentiment. You know, like
Yeah.
I mean, they don't express it, but it's like, I love you, I want to grow old with you and die.
Right.
yeah.
You know,
Because it's
Which isn't always happy.
Yeah.
I
It
can
is-
still see how you could use sweet after the
Yes,
fact, because
yeah.
it's all about reflection at that point. Well, even though you can't, not really around to reflect necessarily, but, you know, it's,
This is-
what we had.
This is if Matrix was a Hallmark movie. Come on.
was a Hallmark movie.
It does hit that.
Let me visualize.
It
Just give me a minute.
hits that. Granted, Hallmark movies tend to get trashed upon because they all tend to be the same and everything like that.
I think you
But
mean
it's-
if Transformers was a Hallmark.
There you go. That's
There
probably
you go.
better. Optimus Prime and Mrs. Optimus Prime rolling out into the sunset.
Slight tangent, just
Because when you said
because
Smith, I'm thinking.
I don't
said
know.
Matrix. I'm thinking Mr. Smith and Mr. Smith essentially, and that's it.
I saw a great T-shirt relating to Transformers the other day. It was the Optimus Prime if he transformed into a TARDIS. And so it's Optimus standing, but his panels look like he transforms into a
Yeah.
TARDIS. Yeah, it was pretty neat.
Dude, I want
Completely
that.
unrelated to music, but related to Transformers since it was mentioned.
Fair enough.
But I could see Michael Bay ruining that sort of a movie.
But then we go
Well.
from the sentiment of I guess the final moments of one's life and rusting away and
Not
dying.
love,
living.
it's love.
It's love. But then we go right into what I believe is the heart of this whole album, the Wired Wrong,
Track 12.
track 12.
I'm kind of with you there. This probably packed one of the, I would say one of the, because there may only be one other contender that's coming. It's one of the most emotional songs, just in terms of, I think in terms of overall meaning.
Message,
Because if you
meaning, and
if you
impact.
take everything that's been said so far, they're fairly easy to unpack. They're not really trying to hide anything. You know, I still would say that up until this point, any child could at least listen to the tone, even if they're not actively listening to the lyrics of the previous tracks, and gauge whatever they were going for.
Yeah.
And then it's a success.
Yeah, and then
Great.
everything else from that point is just a metaphor that experience will let them.
Perfect
Yeah.
family friendliness. But then we get Wired Wrong. This might be open to a matter of debate. Of course, just the title itself, which is the running theme, Wired Wrong, the concept that there's something a little bit off in your head since you were born, or at least you perceive it to be, and that's always a little bit depressing, because it's always a hump you have to get over. And it's a perfect metaphor for a robot, of course, because it takes it literally.
Yeah, and this is song, I mean, in presentation is at the heart of it an Outcast song. For anyone who's ever felt weird or different or not like everybody else, you know, and dealing with it and learning that, you know, overcoming it, learning that you're not wrong, there's nothing wrong with you, or that there's something a little bit wrong with everybody, you know.
And that's okay.
And exactly, and coming to terms.
And this is presented in a much more punctuated noise, a much more punctuated sound. The chord work was very, very explicitly done. Very much
What do you mean by that?
point to point on each of the tones was just so impactful, coupled with the lyrics, coupled with the harmonies, coupled with just the solo vocal work, and some of that, the spine.
I'm going to say
lines.
that at least in terms of tonality here, considering we've had one big sugar fest after another, this really is pretty depressing in tone. After a song called "I'll Rust with You," which was happy essentially,
Yes.
And not
So,
happy. It was happy with darkness.
happy with a dark over. Yeah, there was foreshadowing there. The end of the last track was foreshadowing, which is why I think
Yeah.
this is more. This is why Nelson called this the big tonal.
Well,
shift.
it's sort of first of all, it's beautiful. It is by far, at least for me, the most beautiful song on the record.
I'll agree.
Musically, lyrically, it is stunning.
I'm nearly with you.
And it's the honeybee of this album.
I completely agree. Honeybee, of course, was it served the same purpose. Honeybee was off the previous album, the 2 Cent Show, so it also fell roughly in the same place, middle end, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And it was the single teardrop amidst a sea of
this is what Steam Powered Giraffe is excellent at.
Yeah.
The album 1 did the same thing.
Yeah.
Not Alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was also similarly placed. I mean, they love giving you something that's really going to bring you down. They love doing this.
But it's
they
done.
keep
It's hauntingly beautiful. It's perfectly executed. And if you just take it on the surface level, and you get that these are robots talking about wired wrong, you will be immensely entertained and heartbroken by it.
And one of my favorite lines, not my favorite, but one of my favorite lines from the song, is when the spine goes deep baritone and goes, "Maybe someday I'll be in some place to see my brain isn't wired wrong." And it's just that idea of one day I'll find a way to accept how I'm different and how everyone perceives me to be different. And I just love the way that he brings it in deep. And the best line in this is when everything drops out. It's the very last line, and the spine goes deep, and he goes, "But that's how we've been all along, wired wrong."
Yeah,
and it's chilling. I got goosebumps listening to this.
There's a lot going on here in terms of also just the way they phrase it, the instruments they use to really promote the sadness within this, but the twang of happiness that rises at the end.
Well,
the way the guitar is used sort of as a comping instrument throughout, not necessarily the melody, because who could possibly take the melody next to any one of the vocalists, but the guitar really does take close center stage here, just a secondary stage, excuse me, as it accompanies him along this route, like it's following him along and holding his hand throughout this little inner soliloquy. It's very sweet. But I do want to take one little step back and return to what we were talking about before, which is the discography, not just of Steam Powered Giraffe in general, but about where this arc falls in the pantheon of music. Because I do believe they're doing something fairly unique here. You know, we've talked about arc a lot before in the podcast, how it's kind of important to take you through some kind of story however you wish to tell it. And there's 1,000,001 different ways to tell a story, and I think this is something fairly fresh. They are basically all about the, get off your feet. Here's something happy and another curiosity of life. So we explore the 3 different core personalities of this band, which is, you have the straight man, but he's always, as you said at the show, trying to rouse the audience and keep them entertained, while you have the goofy sidekicks and all this, and one is fairly naive. All this comes together to be kind of a celebration of life. But how could you have that without exploring, at least in some minor sense, the sadness that exists throughout there that you have to live with? And they have that one song that explores it, and we just described what it was on each and every album, and that's just their pattern, which I don't think it's done very often. When you look at any other band, there's a lot of bands that tend to just mull throughout. It's always like throughout the album, it's just one giant tear fest, front to end.
We've reviewed a few of those.
Seriously, and this is kind of a breath of fresh air.
And even in the depths of this sadness in Wired Wrong, there's a glimmer of hope in it.
Yes.
Even it doesn't go so dark that it's hopeless.
That's right.
There's always basically it's acknowledging this dark place, and then there's this wishful mindset of one day I'm going to be in a space to accept myself, and then there's the acceptance. There's the possibility of acceptance.
Yeah, it's not an inescapable black hole.
Yes,
that's what's so beautiful about it.
And that's they always do that. And even in I'll Rust With You, it can get kind of fatalistic, but there's that small glimmer of something better.
It's such a personal feeling. It's such a personal idea for them to portray here.
That's the variance in story arc, which is so important here, which needs to be applied to anything, any story that you're telling from ages 2 to 100. I mean,
Right.
that's just... unless you're super centenarian.
That might
Apparently I'm
be the
exceeding
actual.
supercentenarians. Apparently.
To be honest, this whole album is just personal. It's about personal experiences and personal takes and personal events. This is really a first-person story, to some extent.
Well,
Or just a recounting of tales.
Well, Wired Wrong is a song that, starts off being very much, this is my story.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, this
Yeah.
is our story.
Yeah.
Which is
You
what
know,
a
and
lot
that's
of
how-
these other songs do. A lot of their other, especially emotional songs do.
But especially in Wired Wrong, with the quote that you'd mentioned before, where at the end he talks about how we're all wired wrong, it's this idea that there's not... If you're normal, something's wrong. Well,
Christopher Titus,
It's
the
that-
comedian, did that right. The normal ones are being outnumbered at this point.
It's the idea that we're all wired wrong. We all have something wrong with us, but it's the acceptance and understanding of it that makes us strong, not the fact that something's wrong.
Right, but I'm also glad you mentioned that the fact that this was fairly driven by the spine, and we did mention earlier that this album was a cacophony of everybody sort of jumping in there together, and this is one of the few where you notice that just one person is singing.
Yeah.
That's the unique thing.
It was the
it's the unique
duality.
thing about this album, and I think that was a great artistic choice because it's a perfect highlighter. By making nearly every song a communicative effort, then you leave the ones that are fairly solo to be the focus.
That's like
come along in the album, and you're gonna.
Honeybee
pause.
was all Rabbit. They sang together on parts, but
Yeah.
he took lead on Honeybee, and that's
this
it's
was
the same idea.
This was Rabbit and the Spine going back and forth between the verses, and only really towards the end, towards the last out to the outro, did they really sing in unison. And it was just true heartfelt, tear-jerking feels.
Yeah. All kinds of feels.
Yep.
I had all the feels.
All of them.
All of them.
That's why I didn't have any, because you had them all.
From birth to death, all the feels.
That's a quote.
No.
That needs to be Nelson Lugo. From birth to death, all the feels. That's the name of your next book.
From birth to death, all the feels. The Nelson Lugo story.
There you go.
That's it.
I like
No,
it.
ages 2 to 100. The ones and the supercentenarians still have the feels. That's right. Well, I badmouthed him before. I had to save him.
Right, of course.
Oh, okay.
Make it up.
Okay.
Thankfully, because they're Steam Powered Giraffe, they follow up a song like Wired Wrong with a song called, and I kid you not, Fancy Shoes.
But this is anything but about fancy shoes. Yeah, it is. It is.
Well,
Face
No,
value.
let us have this
No.
moment, John. Let us have this moment. It's
Face
about
value
fancy shoes, and that's all it's about.
So this
But it's
song,
not.
the reason
It's
I like
not.
this song more on a second listen is because it starts out being complete nonsense. It's
Yeah.
led by Hatchworth. He's singing about random things about shoes and not making any sense. But then towards the end of the song, he turns it into...
It's not about
wonderful
the glitter,
nonsense.
the
It's
glitter and glow that you can create in the world. It's not about all the bells and whistles. It's about the substance you bring.
And so it's pretty much them describing their own work as well as just life in general. Putting out an art that there should be something behind it. There should be some worth.
And go ahead.
It's a suit and tie affair, and you're only wearing shoes. And while they're very slick, no one will let you through. Yeah, it's funny, but think about it for a second, and you see
brilliant.
that depth,
It's
and you see that.
brilliant. And this is why I love this band so much, because they can follow something as heartfelt, as deeply personal, and as tear-jerking as Wired Wrong, with something as ridiculously over the top, yet still has something to say in Fancy Shoes. Because they can weave a story. They know what they're doing, and they can go from one end of this room to the other in a blink of the eye.
Well, there's so many tracks out there where, you peel back the layer and there's nothing else. That's it.
Yeah.
There's one layer to this damn onion, right? And in this particular track...
It's an apple.
This album, yes. In the everything, almost everything this band does, it's
There's
pretty
layers.
dense.
You know what's also got layers? Parfait's got layers.
Parfait does have layers. You're right.
You're
Everybody
right.
say
It's 3
everybody say,
layers.
no, I don't want no parfait. No, people like parfait.
Parfait's for everybody. After
But-
podcast.
Can't believe. Did you just quote Shrek?
Yeah, I had
Yeah, he did.
You know what else? Cake. Cake's got layers. Fancy
Where's your
shoes.
head right now?
No, but fancy shoes starts
kinda
off
want
with
cake
that
right now.
cake
Fuck.
out, that cake layer. So
I need
look at
cake. Can we stop? Can we get cake after this podcast?
Get cake.
We can stop for cake on the way home. Sure, I don't see why not.
Anyway,
Unless the cake is alive.
talking about cake, I was actually leading this into something else. This is sweet.
Oh.
It really is got that kind of here's something nice and filling, but it's kind of just empty calories. Until you actually look and cut through the layers and actually get to that meat, get to that
Wait,
actual
now there's
meat.
There's
in
not
this
meat in
cake?
cake.
There's
Unless you're eating meat cake.
there's meat.
meat cake.
Then it's like pie. See, pie's got layers.
All right, shut up. It's shepherd's pie, for the love of God. It looks like a pie. You think it's gonna be sweet. You open it up. It's
I love
bag of
I
meat.
love fancy shoes because it's again.
Everyone's wearing red and you're wearing blue. And just little lines like that. It's like, you're different. Sure, you're different. But what do you actually do?
Yeah, and it's sort of, but it's also like it's okay to do that, but it's also not okay to do that.
You know, I think
Yeah.
they had a word for this in the 19th century, and that was called a dandy. The guy who inherited all of his money, he buys the fanciest clothes, he has the best mustachios and the most awesome mutton chops, and the tails that go down to there.
Sure.
And he contributes nothing to society, but
Kinda
pretend that there's philosophy in his daily meetups.
So you kind of explained who Gatsby is.
That's another good example.
Also,
Yeah.
hipsters.
Okay, so every single...
Considering they are actually fairly popular in the
Every
hipster
era
movement.
has their guy.
True.
Which is, I kind of like that now. New level.
I know level.
We're at level like 6
That's
here.
the boast level of this song. Yeah, I love fancy shoes. It's great.
So, yeah.
Now,
Don't be offended.
before we get into the next track, track 14, this is a reprise of Steam Powered Giraffe. But you have to ask, when you think robots or mechs,
Sure.
you think of what culture, what country?
Mexico.
I was going to say Sweden.
Clever.
Democratic Republic of
Dumb.
Congo, actually.
Japan.
Japan.
When you think of robots, giant fighting robots, you think of Japan. And
I
they
really-
did something brilliant here. They took the Steam Powered Giraffe song that was the first track, or second track on the record, but they Japanified it. They sing the lyrics in Japanese. They give it that awesome, super fun time go kind of background music.
Jarafu.
Exactly.
Steam Powered Giraffe.
And
But
it,
it is like
It's
chord for chord.
Yes. Exactly
you
the
can
same.
overlay them, and actually they would end at the exact same moment.
I think it had to do with the use of the guitar, and there was, I think, a xylophone in there. Everything was always
sure.
going so super fast. You're just at the top of the metronome in these J-pop
I-
songs. And it's
If
just
anybody saw Teen Titans, the
Teen
cartoon,
Titans, go!
they actually have two intros, one which is in English and one which is in Japanese, and until you actually start hearing them singing, it's like the same song, and when they actually start singing one or the other, it's really fun hearing the differences. And this is one of those, if you remember track 2, Steam Powered Giraffe, you're going to be kind of like going along and being like, oh, that's that part where they were talking about that thing, that's that part they were talking about this thing, and you're like, well, this is really sort of out of left field, but not at all.
I was actually surprised. It took me a moment to realize what they were doing.
Yeah.
I didn't get it at first. And at first I thought it was just all random nonsense, like they were just bebopping.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, oh, I know what they're doing. It was really wonderful. And again, I'm a big stickler for, if you're going to tell the joke, commit to it.
Yeah.
And they do the entire song in Japanese.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Well, it's a reprise. I think they're fitting the, you have to do something quirky in a reprise. You can't just,
can't give you
call
the same
back.
thing
Right.
again. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for that reason, they could have very well have ended the album here. They
Oh,
could
yeah.
have. They could have.
Absolutely.
would've
Then
been
it would have
a
been like a
finish.
fine little joke track, and that's
Yeah.
it. But that's not their style.
And if they had actually in fact ended it there, I would have loved it. I would have loved
would
it.
still been satisfied, yeah,
I still would have been
absolutely.
absolutely satisfied with this album.
If you want to joke, well, they're not going to do that.
No.
So they're going to tug at your heartstrings one more time. They have a song called "Turn Back the Clock," and considering their new their new member has a clock, he's very clockwork kind of steam-powered stove
They're
robot.
all clockwork,
True, technically.
to some degree or another.
But this song is in a nutshell, it's a sweeping and gorgeous song singing about wanting more time.
And specifically wanting more time with your offspring. That's what it really seems like to be going. You're seeing someone growing up in front of your eyes, and you wish you could turn back that clock. I would call it akin to, if anybody's seen it, Bicentennial Man.
Yeah.
It's very much that early part of the movie where Robin Williams' robot character shows up and sees
Everybody
Little
he
Miss
loves dies,
and falls in love with Little Miss, and Little Miss falls in love with him, and she moves on, and he stays the same. And you get that same sort of feeling here. This I wrote down the most lines for this song because there's just so much impactful words. Time can make the world strange. Folks you knew don't seem the same. Time don't care. It leaves you there and takes it all from you. Like it's so.
Well, it almost goes against the grain, because you'd think almost like, okay, wait, they're robots, this doesn't seem to be as relevant, but then you start to think about it, time is even something you can't really escape as a robot.
No.
No matter what, you're still part of the same laws of physics as us, and time will flow. Even if you theoretically live forever, you've already been told that you will rust. So...
Right. And also, they're a band that works with human counterparts, and their fans are human, and it's this sad idea that even, they wish they could go back, because eventually we'll get to a point where these things aren't there anymore.
And they don't say, like, they are experiencing the time. That's the whole thing. It's
they
told
sound removed.
Everything else is changing around them. And it has to do with, they really go acoustic in this one. Violin work, piano, guitar. It was really, really pointed, and this was, once again... the Spine singing very solo, deep baritone.
Yeah, within the halfway point here, they started to have the format of a score to a film. There was a full orchestra at that point.
It felt like the end credits to a movie.
It was a full sweeping soundscape, like
soundscape. Perfect.
It was.
We love to use that term.
Yeah,
it was. Really
it was a wonderful, because we're getting towards the end here, and things are winding down. We've had the rising action into conflict, and now we're moving into the resolution, and it's bittersweet, and they're not going to pull a punch from that.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of tasteful that they waited till about the halfway point to really layer that in gently.
And don't you think even a blink you're safe? Just. Right there, right to the crux.
He just said it. No one can escape. No one can escape the inevitable roll of the clock.
And it's one of those songs that it really pulls at your heartstrings, because they're conveying, again, as robots, we're looking at it from this perspective, but it's still a relatable thing that everyone can understand.
It's weird
because it has those layers.
Any parent in the world will relate to this. Anyone who's lost someone. Or feels regret at a missed opportunity is going to weep at this song.
The smiles she had, were they for me? The golden hair, she's 3+3, and like all the imagery that's put into here, it's so removed. Like you can feel that coldness that they actually do in a lot of their music, that kind of logical nature they throw in a lot of the music that is broken. It's almost like they're presenting this very logical idea, or this logical stance in that very broken emotional state, and it's just a great integration of keeping it that slight chill of kind of alienness that they have in their perspective, but making it very humanized.
Well, it's more that you have to wonder what the focus is. You have to wonder whether are they contemplating this as of themselves. But then again, you already said that they were removed in a sense from it. So it almost seems to be this give and take as to whether they're actually affected by it. But of course, they're affected by it from observing the human perspective. Because just like you said, I mean, people will die all around you, and that's something that even a robot can't change, even if they themselves live forever. It's really, really tough. If it's amongst themselves... who knows?
And this
That's
also
kind of a big question mark.
This track, compared with track 16, Bleak Horizon, does what was it? Dream something and then Make Believe do together.
Prelude to a Dream, Make Believe.
So on this, they do this kind of a transition at the end, but it's a seamless transition into Bleak Horizon, which is the final track and an outro on the record, where it's the classic kid story, the child going, "Where are you guys going?" and then talking about where they're going next.
We're done here. Gonna move to the stratosphere. Hey now, no need to be frightened. 'Cause as long as we're together, there's nothing to fear. I don't believe in a bleak horizon. I won't concede to all of that. We need now something different. What we need now is a steam-powered giraffe. And I love... And then the little girl goes, okay, goodbye. And it's just like, aw.
You know,
and
the story is over.
yeah.
Well, so had they twisted the namesake, their own namesake, Steam Powered Giraffe, into a metaphor for something.
Yeah, for something
more.
else.
That transcends life, that transcends everything.
and then they do this thing where they wrap it up. They have this outro, and then they have a good solid. This is a 2-minute song. That's only about 30 to 40 seconds.
It's a 3-minute song that's about 50 seconds.
And then the whole tail end of the song is just strange
Radar with
sonar
sweeping,
robotic sounds.
or a satellite. I got the idea of a satellite.
You mentioned like satellite pings and
with like the
Satellite pings like you'd expect Sputnik to do,
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
primitive in
Yes.
this way.
with a lot of the earlier. I did recognize it. It did sound like a lot of the earlier interpretations of what the universe actually sounds like.
I
sure,
did
sure.
catch, but I do
the
think you
radio
were...
waves of space in auditory form.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's what it was. Because, when you first said sonar, that kind of immediately hit me. Like, it does actually sound like sonar, like it's being played through underwater. But I think I'm more with the
Sputnik.
Astrological,
especially
astronomical.
since they're
Well,
alluding
this
to
is
the
because of the very, very final thing
the
here.
stinger. The album has a stinger.
Its own stinger, its own self-pitch. What's going to be the next album for you? Where is Steam Powered Giraffe going to be?
In
space.
We'll see you in
the
space.
the robot that introed the record and the intro track at the end says, "We'll see you next time in space."
Yes.
And
so-
whoa, number one, whoa,
Yeah, one, whoa.
that's nobody does that. Nobody does that in
Mario
an album.
They do that.
Nobody does that in an album.
Well, they do that.
They do that.
They did it.
They did it. It's done.
What that does
It's
is
done. It's
what that
been
does
did.
is does something that actually it turns the whole album, and I've been seeing this. I was seeing this. A couple of us were seeing this. It turns it into a Disney Pixar movie.
Yeah.
The whole thing. It becomes a uniform story.
Well, the reason I said it related to Pixar is because Pixar are a level of movie, and Disney's done this a bit on their own now too with Wreck-It Ralph and Tangled. But it's mostly a Pixar thing to take something that's clearly for kids, but put enough layers in for adults that they won't be bored either.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Wall-E.
take a look at even a better example. Up. Up has death in the first 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Not something that. The kids weren't crying. The adults were the ones bawling.
I saw it in theaters. Kids were crying too.
Well, but it's it's that idea
okay?
that you can approach adult themes, but still be family friendly. And
My experience,
and
Pixar has done this, and the Muppets have also done this. I think they're
absolutely.
a good cross age group right there.
Monsters. I mean,
Well-
there's so many of them.
But I do want to say something.
Yeah.
Just really quickly here. I mean, not quickly. Depends how whether you're on board with it or not. But there's something at the end of this album when you consider the transition from Turn Back the Clock to Bleak Horizon, and that little bit of dialogue that you described between the kid and them. That, well, where are you going? Well, it's almost like we've had enough. We're leaving.
Yeah.
It kind of implies that there's been a little bit more going on than we're even seeing in this album, which means there could be yet another layer. When you consider Turn Back the Clock, it's almost got a twang of anger to it. Why else would anyone... I mean, yes, we say it mournfully, but often we really do want the clock turned back. It's kind of wishing itself out of fruition. It's not going to become true.
Yeah.
That's what it's. That they have to move on
That's
and
it.
aren't happy with it.
That's the what I get from it.
It could be double meaning. I could see that.
Well, that would imply that there would be more going on throughout the album from front to back.
Well, that's also possible. I mean, this whole album is layers upon layers upon layers of stuff. I can only imagine that after I've listened to this like the 50th time, I'll discover something and go, "Oh, that's what they meant."
Yeah.
I'm kind of viewing this as E.T.
Go on.
No, they show up.
You had
Listen,
join
listen.
us with John. John's metaphors.
They show up, have a bunch of great adventures with whoever they've met, back and forth. It's almost like they're talking about this child that they met on Earth. At the end of it, like this child they met, they went on a series of great adventures. something kind of gets messed up towards the end, things go wrong, and then they have to leave.
Mhm.
That's E.T.
Okay,
That's E.T.
kinda.
Okay.
But he really had to go home,
And
He
now
was
they
left
have to
there.
He was
go.
dying.
No, but
He
that's
was-
the whole thing. They have to go.
No, this is a choice to me. I can't buy
Yeah,
it.
they're
This is
leaving.
a solid
They're choosing
choice.
to leave. It was
These
cool.
are
Okay.
sentient beings.
Yeah.
But, okay, there is parallels, just not deep.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, parallels. I wouldn't draw the same conclusions you are. That's all I'm saying.
I draw lots of
I've learned to turn John down a little bit when it comes to these moments, but only because
yes.
even just with last week we were talking about Like Rats by Mark Kozlek, and to an extent I do believe you can delve into something a little bit too far. There might be
Right.
more of a face, and there's nothing wrong with anything face value here,
Of course.
because what's face value here is kind of awesome. That's
Yeah.
fine. I'm fine with that.
I said it so angrily.
I do
kind of awesome.
but I do want to emphasize that they're making kind of obvious toward the end, especially when you consider those noises. It's almost as if they're there now. They're off. They're about. It took off. They're gone.
They got inside their steam powered giraffe
Yeah.
and now are in space.
You can't ignore 2 minutes of that.
Well,
Yeah.
here's the thing. I do want to go back just a little bit further
Yes.
because I think we can't ignore the fact that it goes from turning back the clock into Bleak Horizon seamlessly.
Yes.
There's barely a breath
Right.
between these two, and
That's important.
and then when we were listening to it, it didn't even occur to me that it was a completely different track.
Yeah.
Literally, it's like, turn back the clock, and now we're singing another song. And so to me, the two ideas are actually the ideas from both of these pieces are feeding off of one another, right?
They're intertwined.
So it's turn back the clock. There's we cannot the progression of time is going to happen regardless of what we want out of life, and things are going to grow up and grow old and die, or things are going to not be the way that we would like them to be forever. And now we're done. We've come to do what we have done, and we have to go now.
Well, I mean, yes and no. We've done what we had to do, and now we have to go. I was always under the impression that I could have been mistaken that they were created here on Earth. If they were created here, then to go, it almost sounds like returning in that way to space, and I don't think that's a really returning. I think that would be just a choice to leave out of perhaps frustration, and this is where I was kind of going with this. And that's the theme that I might see. Again, I'm not really putting my whole heart and soul into this, but I do see some frustration with the human element in this album. A little bit more than was present in the 2 Cent Show, which was more of a carefree exploration, and it's kind of sweet to see these human things fed through the robot consciousness. But in this time, when you look at some of the tracks here, Please Explain is about the frustration of language and how that can all screw you up. And you have she said maybe. She said maybe is basically the frustration of you've got at that point ambiguity. Ambiguity is not something that exists in the robot mind. You don't have that there. You have yeses and nos, ones and zeros. It's all just a very flaky kind of album in terms of experience on one thing to the next. And of course,
it's damn fun getting there.
Yeah. And of course, I think that's accentuated with the naivete of Hatchworth, if anything. That
and
could,
to some extent,
that
Rabbit.
Could put it all in perspective, perhaps, for the Spine and the Rabbit. Yeah.
I really couldn't said it better myself. I really couldn't have. That was a great. No,
I could have, but I'm
that's
not
what
gonna.
I usually do. That's my shtick. He stole my shtick here.
I did steal.
We've used
steal,
shtick in this
steal
podcast more than I think we've ever used it before.
Yeah.
together.
I'm just saying, it's a sticky podcast.
Overall,
We stick together.
I just kept seeing, that they've arrived. As a band and as thematic storytellers, this album just kind of screams, "We've arrived. We're damn good at what we do. Here it is."
Well,
And now
when we get the fourth album, we can verify or disprove a lot of this.
Yeah.
it's
whether space is merely another backdrop for their
Sure.
fun and gags,
or if they're going to do something off the wall.
Yeah.
But it's more
I'm sure
like
there'll be meaning.
their first 3 albums are sort of like the album 1, 2 Cent Show are kind of the growing pains, growing up album.
Mm-hmm.
This is their magnum opus, sort of
Sure.
of that early theme work, their humanization, and now they have to move on to bigger and better. That's where the space is coming in. They're exploring the new frontier.
Well, the reason
final
the
frontier.
reason I had to take this route,
One would say.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
indeed.
The reason I had to
Quite.
take this route with this album is just because of the dialogue nature of it. Again, there's certain albums where it depends on what's the chief focus at that time. There's just in certain cases the music is the chief focus. You're meant to really focus on the instrumentals and take the lyrics for what they're worth. A lot of times, we had a huge discussion on what was it, the face value versus the naked truth. There's a lot of when it comes to instrumental albums, you have to take things with a grain of salt, especially with lyrics, because the vagueness is meant to be there. But this is kind of straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
They're wordsmiths, so I think we can start doing a rating. I think that has to be an element here. That's why I incorporated the
Okay.
overall theme here, because I think they're telling a story, they're telling a narrative. It's a universal narrative, but it's fed through their lives, the lives of 3 simple robots. So,
Well, why don't you take us and lead us to our ratings and start us off? Give us a wrap up, Steve. Since you
Now,
seem
what's
to be
the now refresh
no,
my memory?
someone break it up for me.
Yeah,
One
I-
person has to
okay.
go before me.
Refresh my
start.
memory. How does the rating system work?
So to,
0 to 5 stars.
Okay, 5
We-
being the best, 0 being the worst.
Yes.
Okay.
That seems very straightforward, but it really all depends upon what you're looking for most in any given situation or any album.
So what's the general criteria that you guys
We
use?
do have our different criteria
Yes.
for 0 to 5. Just as I said, it depends on what you're looking. Whether you're looking for something in a situation,
Sure.
for instance, in the context of what Steam Powered Giraffe does,
Sure.
or if you're looking for it in the pantheon of music.
And we will-
I tend to focus on that, and of course, it's my perspective of
Sure,
the pantheon
obviously.
of music. So,
So
it can
does-
only be yours.
So do you average all of the scores together, or are they
No, we
individually?
do-
we
Ours stand alone.
post individually
Okay.
and average.
yeah, we do both.
And just as
There's
a
an
point
Excel
of
document.
reference,
I'll show it to you.
at a point of reference, 3-star is music.
Average.
It's average.
music.
Yeah.
It's average. It's listenable, not good, but not great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll start. This is, in auditory form, the best Dr. Seuss book of all time. It
Wow.
kind of is. It has that very Cat in the Hat, start somewhere, go on adventures, do this, do that, back and forth. But there's a message in there. There's meaning in there.
All right.
It goes through
save
that
yourself
transition.
from the ET thing. I like
Yeah,
that better.
I found Seuss is probably more accurate. It's not. This is. You look at it you look at it just without the depth, and I don't think you're gonna realize so much of what's here. You're gonna find the harmonies beautiful. You're gonna find the lyrics fun or funny. You're gonna see some of the jokes, but there's just so much here that's just so great. Because you gotta keep saying they really did great job with the music. We really didn't touch upon that. There was
It's hard
the
to touch upon
layering
that
is
'cause
great.
That's part of what I was talking about. What's the focus? Honestly,
The music did a great backdrop, and it didn't really shine through. There was a couple of solos, which is something a little bit different, but none of them stood out because there was just so much going on with their stories, with their dialogue, and with their harmonies. The music just meshed with what they were conveying, and it honestly, Roller Skate is the worst song on the album, and it's just a great intro, a great interlude. It's just a good breathing track for the death that comes later. I love it. I love where they're going with it. I did as much crying on this one as I did on the 2 Cent Show. There's even subtext in some of the songs like Wired Wrong that we didn't even touch upon that you can find out for yourself. Just go to their website. I just so emotionally, so connected to it. The lyrics are great, all over the place. This is a 4.75. This is just an incredible album.
Okay.
So what? A 4.75?
That's
Yeah.
really high for me.
Wow.
I've given out 1.5 and 1.49.
Goodness.
And only like maybe 5 or 6
They'll
have
see
been
the
above
Excel
4 or 5,
document.
I'll look at the Excel doc. Goodness.
As
Yeah.
I push up my glasses. John kind of summed it up fairly well. I want to go out and say it first. I didn't give this album a fair chance the first time I heard it, and I discovered a lot about it on the second listen. And subsequent listens after that, I think I'll discover more. And it's funny because I had the same experience with 2 Cent Show. There were songs on 2 Cent Show that I wasn't super fond of the first listen, and then since then, being obsessed with that record, I've fallen in love and found things to love in a lot of the songs. There's definitely stuff on face value that seems somewhat simple and almost childish at first, but again, that goes with the theme of introducing this new band member who's very childish in nature and all of that. But after more analyzation, I mean, it's very clear that there's so many layers to this album, so many layers to the songs. There's plenty to connect to, and it's very emotional. Where I find difficulty is rating it higher or lower than 2 Cent Show. And that's because, I mean, I know typically we try and avoid comparing artists to their previous works and to judge it as it stands alone. But because they're so vaudeville-y and so, very show-based, I get a cinematic picture of 2 Cent Show specifically that this doesn't quite live up to in the same way. It lives up to differently. Because it's very different from 2 Cent Show. And it's not even trying to be the same album. Not even close. You said, what was it? A Way Into Your Heart is the only one that gets anywhere close to the same sound.
Ghost Grinder to some extent.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But that's really it. So, I personally think it's as good as the previous record for different reasons to me. I like it as much as I like 2 Cent Show. So, for me, it's a 4-5. There's still a little bit of schizophrenia and, kind of vacantness in a couple songs that, like the end of Mecto Amor I felt was a little repetitive. And again, it's not saying by any means that these songs are bad, but there were little glitches in the system, I guess we can say, considering the theme.
How apropos.
That was punny.
Well
I will give
done.
you that one.
Thank
That
you.
was a pretty
Well
good pun.
done, sir.
That pulled me out of it a bit. Songs like Roller Skate King, which was fun, but there wasn't much more besides that, and so on and so forth. But the tail end of the album, I mean, after Roller Skate King is impenetrable. It's brilliantly done, and as a whole, I still love the record. So I put it on the same level I put the last record. It's a 4.5 for me.
All right. Yes, I will give my guest the final word. All right. There's a lot of layers to what this band does, and I'm going to go as far as to say this album specifically over that of the 2 Cent Show. Again, this is not really about a comparison thing. I just said I kind of tend to rate it against the Pantheon. I respect what they do within their own discography, and I'm going to mention that at least. There was definitely a little bit more camp value, in my opinion, in the 2 Cent Show than there was here. I know that's kind of strange, considering the seeming immaturity here, but I mean immaturity, of course, in the fact that it seems to be aimed toward a kid audience. But that's not to say that the overall theme needs to be directed toward a kid audience. I think the overall theme is directed toward everybody. That's that universal album, which is pretty important, in my mind, toward the grand scheme of things, the Pantheon. Prior to that, I suppose maybe the 2 Cent Show was a little bit more niche-y. It was great. It was perfect, but it was still a quirk in its way. I enjoyed it in its quirkiness, but I couldn't say that it would apply to everyone. There was still that. We actually have gone this entire day without even mentioning steampunk. Hardly. Steampunk, of course, is where they kind of got their popularity from, because they were popular within the ilk. But this album, it sort of steps out of that a little bit, and I'm kind of glad for it. I don't like things always falling into like a neat little box. I know that they have their target audience, and that's very, very important from a marketing perspective, but I'm so appreciative that they made the conscious effort to go a little bit more broad. There's a lot of themes here. Narrative themes about coming to terms with the world around you, which every kid should be familiar with, or should grow to become familiar with, and which just about everyone should become familiar with at some point. Again, I'm not really married to that theme necessarily, at least in terms of they're going to space because they're, disgusted with the world. I think it would be a little bit too strong. But I do think there's that exploration of the world around it, which I just love so much. But then I have to switch gears, and I think we've already talked that to death. I don't want to repeat it to death. So I want to switch gears here and just talk about the music for a little bit. Because that's the one thing here which I'm sort of iffy about. There's moments... well, first of all, harmonies, there's no question. We've all pretty much agreed that the harmonies are, stellar. They have amazing vocal ability. So let's see how it works together with the rest. It tends to go back and forth song by song. If I had one critique here, from a musical standpoint, it might go back to what I experienced in A Way Into Your Heart, track 5. Just because of that little country shift. Not just because, they decided to switch genres halfway through the song. They're actually very talented at making songs meld. But then it's how their strongest suit, those harmonies, work with what's going underneath them. And that, I sometimes felt like the rest was a little weak by comparison, because their harmonies are just so overtly good. There was a lot going on there in terms of their vocal work in that track, and I just felt like the music was there. And I don't necessarily want to feel that. I still, in the end, kind of boil it down to music. I love narrative, but, nothing will get me going like music that fits that narrative and accentuates that emotion. For me, it comes down to the music in the end. That said, that's objectively, and I do think I'm going to make this an objective rating. I want to just add that as one element. It's one element, and I think the theme here is probably the most important thing. So I'm going to... I was somewhere between you with the 4.5 and the 4.75, but just because I'm so unbelievably entertained, I'm sticking with John's 4.75.
Wowzers. Well, it's no secret that I love this band, and I've loved this band for a very, very long time. And I've been looking forward to this album for a long time. And I am both absolutely pleased and proud of the work that they did, and really embrace the new stuff that they're doing, the bolder chances they're making lyrically, the bolder chances they're making musically. They've always been very good storytellers. They've always been very good at being funny. This is the first album where they don't feel the need to be funny all the time. And this is a very funny album. This has got a lot of really good, genuine laughs in it.
We laughed through, throughout some.
Throughout, there's some really funny and amazing jokes, but they're not relying on the jokes. It's funny because that's just who they are. They just see the world through a comedic lens. But there's also a profound sadness. There's a profound sense of loss and. It goes to that sort of classic comedic thing where, you can only be hysterically funny if you've experienced something profoundly sad.
Yeah.
And to me, this album really, at least brings home for me, like the sense that there's a profound, deep and meaningful thing that they are trying to say, and it could be a couple of things. It could be a call to action. It could be, we're all different and that's okay. It could be as something as silly as she said maybe instead of no. And I was very, very pleasantly entertained and brought. And given an emotional state that I haven't had in a previous work of theirs, and so I love it. And if you're not a fan of steampunk, you're still gonna love it. And if you're a fan of steampunk, you're still gonna love it. It's
got everything.
It's that universality.
It's the thing. Like you don't need to be a fan of steampunk to get another level of it. Because it doesn't matter or not if you've never heard of steampunk or if you have heard of steampunk. If you enjoy narrative, if you enjoy a good beginning, middle, and end to your music, you're going to love this album. You know, or at the very least, you're going to walk away from this album being very entertained. At the very least, you know, and for that alone, I'm going to give these guys a perfect 5.
Whoa.
Yeah. Because
home run.
Well, because there are so many people out there who attempt the narrative, who attempt a classic beginning, middle, and end,
right.
and don't really make it. You know, this not only does every single song have a clear beginning, middle, and end, but the whole album, from the opening intro dialogue to the closing stinger, there's it's a classic theater graph. It has a rising action, it has a conflict, and then there's resolution. You know, and the ending isn't your classic happy ending. It's a bit bittersweet, but there's still hope at the end of it. And for that alone, just for making a fucking story that I can latch onto, that gets a 5. The fact that they're brilliant musicians and they can harmonize like angels and they're funny as hell, all of that just adds to it. You know?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors.
Clearly, the rating across the board for our overall average is go out and buy this record. Hands down, just throw money at it.
Get on
this
Amazon.
Is on a level of burn it, listen to it, buy it. Just buy the freaking record.
Just buy it.
Just go get it.
Just go buy it. You're gonna. You're going to. You know.
There's very few people I could think of that wouldn't find something entertaining in this.
Get
Nelson's
this album
absolutely right.
And give them money so they can make more.
Yeah, and
that's what it
thing-
boils
and-
down to. I want them to keep making.
And ultimately, there are only like 5 or 6 albums that I will listen to all the way through and not skip over a track. In fact, there's very few albums where I like more than 2 tracks on it. This, along with maybe 5 others, is something that I will listen to beginning, middle, and end without skipping a damn one.
It's very important
Yeah.
for records. I even feel like 4.75. You know, I've only rated a few things, a small handful of things above that. And even still, I think that the only reason I keep it there is maybe just because, you know, I want even more showmanship, maybe in the rest of the instruments.
Yes,
and whatnot.
a little bit
because
more
it is,
pushing.
you know, it is a backdrop, and it's a very suitable backdrop. But there are just moments where I do want it to break out, and it's very lyric heavy. Sometimes I want a breather.
Maybe
That's
a little
about it.
more
That's about it.
masturbatory guitar work. Maybe a little bit more piano.
Not even.
Not
I mean,
even.
of course, it would have to work in a
knows?
It would have
way
to
that I'm
stand out.
not
Who
going
knows
to.
what- yeah, who knows
I'm not
what it
going
would
to
be?
tell anybody what to
I
do.
mean, for me, all these ratings are within a range of what I expected. I mean, for me, it's just this album. I like it as much as I like the last one. It's the simplest way to explain
Yeah.
it. All the other stuff that everyone said is valid, but for me, I enjoyed it as much as the last one. So it gets the same rating as the last one. Like it doesn't. It's not always going to be that simple, but in this case, it was. Thank you for bringing us this record.
Thank you for letting me bring it.
I think you're a record breaker in terms of guests that we've had on, and when you add up the average, the total average, I believe you're going to be the winner.
Yeah. So there you go. So
that?
you win there.
There's that, which is nice.
Yeah.
Can I put that on my website?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, you can.
Absolutely.
I won
Hey, guess what?
records.
I won Crash Chords. I won.
I won it.
If you want to hear Nelson's backstory and where he comes from and what he does and all his details of his life from birth to death, because he's really a ghost and not actually here, listen to episode
19.
But
And, unfortunately, because you brought us such an awesome record, you're short on time, buddy. Tell us more about your life.
I don't care. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm a magician. I have a website, nelsonlugo.com. You want to see magic? You want to see nerdy magic? You want to hear me tell jokes? Go to nelsonlugo.com. If I also have a podcast that I co-host with a nerdy nerdcore rapper. That's redundant.
it is redundant.
Nerdy nerdcore.
But it's called
That's just
the Epic
exaggeratory.
Piecast. You can find it at nerdyshow.com along with a family of other nerdy podcasts. So go to nerdyshow.com and we are Epic Piecast.
You can talk a little more. You got 10 minutes.
Oh, fuck!
So
I got it all out.
I screwed you.
So I
end before
know
the beginning.
for knowing Nelson a little over a year now, he's done. You used to because unfortunately it's no longer around. But you used to host a burlesque show, Epic Win Burlesque.
Yes.
Which I loved, which was put to bed very recently.
Sure.
But now you're focusing more on your magic.
Yes.
And as I hear, you're working on a one-man show through the grapevines.
Correct.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about how that's been, where you are with it, where it's going?
How's
We're
it
circumventing the grapevine.
Oh, Circumventing. Well, basically, I wrote a one-man show, which is a hybrid piece of theater that is part magic show, part one-man show, and then part storytelling show, in the same vein of like The Moth or what's the other big one that I can't remember right now.
You've been spouting a lot of theater tonight, so
yeah. Well, I mean, I come from a very strong theater background, so that's where a lot of my brain goes in terms of like stuff.
Magic is a theater.
Very much,
it's theater.
Magic is a form of theater in much the same way that dance is a form of theater.
And a very personalized form of theater.
Oh, very much so. And my show, which is called Gathering the Magic...
See what he did? That's good.
That's a nerd reference that I don't think Steve gets. Because of the card game.
I know of the damn card game.
Magic the Gathering.
Right.
Oh, for the Lord.
So basically the show is about how a 9-year-old nerd grows up to be a very old nerd. And it's really a love story between a man and his magic, and I tell stories about my life, and some of them are really funny, some of them are pretty sad, but it's all about ultimately it's all about how one sort of gathers the things in their life that may not be important at the time, but ultimately looking back realize, oh wow, this has informed the rest of my life. And there's a lot. It's a lot of fun. I think it's funny in places and serious in places. And
the whole point of theater is since theater is there's comedy and there's tragedy. There's the smiling face. There's the frown, the sobbing. Incorporating that is very difficult. Number one.
Yeah.
And
yes, it is.
I got to give you props for doing a one-man show, because I've seen dozen and a half off-Broadway one-man shows. I could probably think of one I liked.
Oh yeah,
because
yeah,
they're very, very hard to do.
Yes, they are.
The key is monologuing.
Yes, it is.
I don't know if you know this about Nelson, but he likes to talk.
I noticed that.
I don't know what you mean.
And I think, you know what? You're probably with your magic, you already have the background training in interacting one-on-one with the audience.
You were making a lot of inferences here, John.
I am.
No, he's exactly right.
Okay.
Basically.
Break, John.
Well, basically, I'm primarily a stage magician. I'm not a close-up guy. Where my particular art form, where my particular passions lie, is being on stage in front of an audience, doing larger scale things. And there aren't a lot of opportunities for me to do that, at least on a narrative level. So the only way that I found to do that is to create a show where I get to do that. And so that's what really Gathering Magic is.
And also, I've found when looking at TV, movies, and other things, when people are trying to get to that next level, a lot of the times if they can't find something to join, they do it themselves.
Yeah.
That's the key.
And I think that's great, because people relate to a personal story.
Absolutely.
And the fact that, there's no magic show that you want to become a part of or travel with, so you'll make a show yourself that you feel comfortable with. Yeah. And that you really want to put out there.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's a very it's a vulnerable piece. I do like to talk about myself, but I don't necessarily like to share a lot about myself. Right. And so this to me is a very vulnerable, very raw, very emotional piece, and I'm happy and terrified that it's now a thing in my life.
And I hate to put you on the spot. But I'm gonna.
Okay. I'm not going to do a magic trick on the radio.
No,
it doesn't work that way.
I was going to ask that. I was going to ask you to have any verbal auditory magic tricks.
We haven't been mentioning it, but he's been routinely making each of his fingers disappear and reappear in other parts of his body. But this show, do we have a time frame?
I was planning for a late January premiere. Unfortunately, I lost my theater space a month ago, so I'm kind of scrambling for another theater space. But if you go to nelsonlugo.com, all of the information will be available there as I get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does that work? The process of scoping out theater space. I'm sorry. I'll retract.
It's a lot like finding an apartment in New York.
You know, I wanted
so
to,
it's like pulling
I wanted to
teeth.
liken it. I wanted to
And
liken it to that, but
worshipping-
maybe a lot worse.
When you're renting an apartment, people actually want you to be a good tenant. They want to find people who are going to be good people to rent the apartment, right? In theaters, nobody wants you. Nobody wants you and nobody cares.
Yeah.
And so you have to sell them.
You have to sell yourself.
No, hey, this is a thing you want. I don't know if I want that. No, it's a hybrid theater. I don't know what that word means. So, you know.
Well, we wish you all the luck with your show.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing it once you have a theater and you're out and running.
Thank you very much. Thank
A
you.
theater.
A theater.
A theater.
Yeah.
And we definitely appreciate having you again.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you,
look
thank you.
forward to having you in the future. Maybe we'll get you and your co-host on here, who has not been named actually the entire podcast, which is surprising.
Good. That asshole.
And Steve's just going, I have more to bleep. He might not even do it.
I have a life.
No, you don't, please.
mean.
But we would love to have both of you guys on the show. And
Sure.
Can we say his name now?
So, of course, we're talking about his co-host Schaefer, the Dark Lord, who
I've been rants about from time to time.
because I'm obsessed with his new record, as is Nelson. Actually,
I am also obsessed with his record. Yeah.
But hopefully we'll have him on as well in the new year. Before we start wrapping up, Steve will bring us our spam mail of the week from our devoted spam bot.
Spam. I blog often, and I genuinely appreciate your content. Your article has truly piqued my interest. I'm going to bookmark your website and keep checking for new information about once a week. I opted in for your RSS feed, too. By K. Darier.
How do you know this is spam?
I don't know anymore.
They've achieved
We've only had
sentience.
spam. I don't know what real spam looks like.
It actually sounds like a reasonably thought out
It-
content.
to a point.
Except it's going to be on something
Except that
silly
it's
like a picture or
I
some
see.
random
Yeah, I
no
see.
post
Thing is-
this week. Yay! Look at this. This is an intriguing article. There's no post this week.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yay!
You know why? You know why, Nelson? 'Cause
Why?
it's a little too perfect. Just a little too perfect, yes.
Okay.
About once a week? How convenient. See? Just not overbearing enough, but not nonchalant about it. He's
Fair
perfect.
enough.
He's perfect.
Fair enough.
I'll have to convert him to real sentence, make him a robot.
Our final album choice for this year is actually going to be a no pick / all pick. We're doing something a little different. John looked up the top 200 albums of the year
And I
to
went
this
to the
point
top. I took the top 10 albums.
of that top 200, and we picked one. And we chose one of a band that we're kind of hit or miss on. We don't have too much expectation of. It's Mumford & Sons' new record, Babel. I had liked the single from their first record, The Cave. The song is called The Cave, not the album. So we're going to give this one a shot, too.
The goal of this is that for our final album of the year, before we commute all of our ratings together and make corrections and give poop ratings and all that stuff that we do in our year-end review, which will air New Year's, this will be just a little more of a light-hearted one. It's pop. It's shameless pop.
Yeah.
It is very high in the charts.
And-
Everyone is buying it. We want to find out why.
And we really didn't want to do Miley Cyrus. Or
No.
I really
I
didn't wanna
refuse.
do
Sorry, not going to happen. I won't do it.
Cyrus.
I want to pretend she doesn't exist. So I want to thank...
That's too bad because she speaks very highly of you.
Sure, yeah, she listens every week.
He
I'll
heard
bet.
through the grapevine.
I want
Like
to
a
thank...
wrecking ball. You just hit us with that.
I know.
I want to thank Nelson again for coming on. It's been a pleasure. Check out the Epic Podcast. It's a great show. It's a lot of fun. And before we wrap up, as we're wrapping up, I'd like to have Nelson say our sign off, if you would.
Music is life, and life is good.